Welcome, everyone. Reeve, you want to give me a little more? Okay, wonderful. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today for this celebration of the Institute's 45th anniversary. For those of you who I've not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Ishan Tigunayat, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute. It's a really wonderful day, and it's so fantastic to see this whole auditorium full to capacity. There's still a few people coming in. Please, I think there are a few seats left back, and we'd love for you to take your seats. And a special welcome to hundreds, maybe even thousands of people joining us online for the live stream of this celebration as well. Many people asked me, is 45 a special number in the Vedic tradition, in the Himalayan tradition? And that question brings a smile to my face every time I hear it. The answer is yes and no. Absolutely yes, because it brought us all here together today. This last year has been a year of wonderful changes and growth at the Institute. And a year ago, as we were looking forward to 2016 and realized that it's the 45th anniversary, we felt it's just a fantastic opportunity to look back and look to the future and to celebrate how we've reached here and after 45 years of service. It's also a remarkable year in that it's not only the Institute's 45th anniversary, it's the 25th anniversary of Yoga International coming up this July, and the 20th anniversary of Swamiji's Mahasamadhi this November 13th. So it's a very intriguing year of milestones, and let's just call it our warm-up for the 50th anniversary celebration in 2021. So the format for today is very casual and celebratory. We wanted to begin with a brief retrospective. So some young member calling out to us. A brief retrospective of the timeline that many of you who are here in person had the opportunity to see upstairs. It's a timeline of milestones from the last 45 years that we'll share on the screen, and we'll give some more background. And it'll set the stage for the second portion of the program, where we'll invite a number of our key members and visionaries and leaders of the Institutes from its founding all the way to today to share their reflections on what 45 years of service has meant to them and to the world. And we'll conclude with a keynote presentation from Pandiji about the Institute's mission and our roots and our future. So to begin, we'll start with the slideshow, and I'd like to introduce someone whom almost all of you know who will be sharing the mic with me to present this milestone presentation. Sujata Suzanne Grady, to my right, has been a resident at the Institute since 1978, but associated with the Institute since the early 70s.
1973.
1973. Yeah. And it's just amazing for me to imagine teenage Sujata at the founding era of the Institute with Swamiji. She's been a member and secretary of the Institute's board since 1987, and served the Institute in so many capacities it might take me the whole duration of this presentation to share. Currently serving as the director of our human resources and administration. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Sujata to narrate the presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. So many familiar faces, new faces. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you. And I think about all those folks, a lot of them probably out there in virtual land watching us and saying hello to them as well. There are a lot of some of the early members of the Institute who weren't able to be with us today who I know are out there. So I welcome them especially. So I have often hoped for a long afternoon like this of satsang and storytelling. It's been my dream for a long time, actually. And the ability to recap the amazing journey of the Himalayan Institute. I never get tired of hearing the inspiring, sometimes unbelievable tales of generosity and love and commitment shared by so many people in building and sustaining this organization. I'm honored and delighted to begin that story by traveling with you on a timeline through some of those highlights of our history. So, 1969. By any measure, Sri Swami Rama, who is the founder of the Himalayan Institute, lived an extraordinary life. He was one of the greatest adepts, teachers, writers, and humanitarians of the 20th century, and he lived among us for a little while. Born in northern India, he was raised from early childhood by the Himalayan sage Bengali Baba, who was Swamiji's most beloved master. Under the guidance of this master, he traveled from monastery to monastery, from caves and valleys to highest peaks, to study with many Himalayan saints and sages, including his grandmaster, who was living in a remote region of Tibet. In addition to this intense spiritual training, Swamiji received higher education in both India and Europe. From 1949 to 1952, he held the prestigious position of Shankaracharya of Karvipitam in South India. He renounced that position and thereafter returned to his master to receive further training. After completing an intensive 11-month practice in a cave in the Himalayas, Swamiji's master told him he was now prepared to carry the message of the Himalayan sages to the West. Swamiji asked his master, "What shall I teach students in the West?" His master said, "The message of the Himalayan sages is timeless and has nothing to do with the primitive concepts of East and West. Inner strength, cheerfulness, and selfless service are the basic principles of life, whether you live in the East or the West. A human being is a member of the cosmos. Free yourself from all fears is the first message of the Himalayan sages. The second message is to be aware of the reality within." His master told him to travel first to Japan, where he would meet someone who would help him come to the US. He told Swamiji that he would find friends and students to help him with his work and to stay mindful of every opportunity that arose to fulfill his mission. Swamiji was fond of telling us that he left India for Japan with a one-way ticket and $8 in his pocket. In Japan, he did indeed meet those friends and seekers who helped him, and in 1969, he first came to the US. So, in those early days, Swamiji traveled and taught ceaselessly on a wide variety of topics throughout the states, beginning in Hawaii, and eventually focusing his visits to Chicago and Minneapolis. It was through a connection in Minneapolis that he was introduced to Dr. Elmer Green of the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas. Dr. Green was head of the Voluntary Controls Program in the research department of the Menninger Foundation. Dr. Green was researching the mind-body relationship and the mind's capacity to regulate physiological processes, including those thought to be involuntary. Dr. Green invited Swamiji to come to the Menninger Foundation and demonstrate under laboratory conditions some of the yogic feats of physiological control that Dr. Green had heard about. Swamiji readily agreed. He participated in research at the Menninger Foundation for a short time in 1969 and then returned for a longer stay in 1970. He told the research team that he had come to broaden the understanding of scientists and the medical community about the connection between the mind and body, and between science and spirituality. He hoped that this knowledge, involving healthy living practices and certain types of yogic practices, would lead to breakthroughs to help those suffering from many illnesses and alleviate much suffering. He demonstrated the capacity of his mind to control bodily functions normally thought outside conscious control. He changed the flow of blood in his hand to flow out of one side of his palm and into the other, leaving one side dead and the other side bursting with life. And then he reversed the process. By the way, he used to tell us that was the hardest thing he did there. He also famously stopped his heart from pumping blood, which was an amazing reality to the scientists who were watching that happen. He also demonstrated that he could remain conscious even in the deep sleep state, and after waking up, he could tell the researchers everything that had been said and done in the room around him while he was asleep, not only in that room, but in the room on the floor above as well. So he used to tell us emphatically that he did not do this work as a circus trick or to show off. He did this to demonstrate the vast, untapped potential of the mind and spirit to heal and transform human life. And indeed, his work opened a new era in understanding the mind-body connection in research and healing modalities. If you'd like to explore this further, the work he did at the Menninger Foundation is documented by the Greens in many scientific journals and continues to be referenced in publications today. There are a number of books. Just go online and take a look. You can also read in detail about it in Pandiji's book, At the 11th Hour, the biography of Swami Rama. And also Doug Boyd, who was Swamiji's assistant in those days, has written a lovely book called Swami that really details those days, and it's a wonderful read. Okay. So, there's a familiar logo for some of us. Swamiji left the Menninger Foundation in 1970, and though he still traveled constantly, Chicago became his home base. Here he met students who had a thirst for the knowledge he wished to impart and a desire to help him with his mission. Wherever he went, Swamiji inspired action. He always saw the very best in everyone he met, and in speaking to that bright part of us, he inspired us to rise to be our best selves and then share that with others. From his first days in the West, people were filled with enthusiasm to help him share what he brought from the sages, a living legacy verified in the laboratory of his own life and passed on, passed on to us to verify and make our own in our own lives. Among those early students were people from all walks of life, business people, housewives, college students, a few who came with some knowledge of yoga but wanted to know more. A group of those early students came together to create a vehicle for Swamiji to do his work, and in June of 1971 in Chicago, the Himalayan Institute was born. Swamiji came ready with a name for this organization, the Himalayan International Institute of Yoga Science and Philosophy of the USA, and he came with a logo. This was the very first logo. Swamiji brought this drawing with him from India. He said it was symbolic of the work the Institute would do, that in mythology, swans had the unique ability to separate milk from water, as yogis are able to distill from the mix of life and many different scriptures the very best and most nourishing parts for themselves and others. And the lotus that is anchored in the floor of the pond, that rises above in beauty. It represents the ideal to live in the world, but rise above its many dichotomies and vicissitudes in peace and in joy. The circling snake invokes the energy of Kundalini Shakti that is awakened in the yogi through practice and grace and rises to lead us to the all-pervading light that is our true nature. Soon after, Swamiji created another version of this logo that incorporated the Sanskrit words from the Bhagavad Gita that mean yoga is skillfulness in action. That is the true motto of the Himalayan Institute all these 45 years. He taught us to practice on your mat, sit in your cave, but then get up and get out and serve the world, as he did. So, from its inception, the Himalayan Institute has always provided humanitarian support to the neediest of the needy. Swamiji already had this habit in him in India before he came to the West, and he inspired us here to continue that process. And over the course of this afternoon, you'll hear many different stories of the work that he's done to serve others throughout the world. I remember the earliest days, they talked about eye hospitals, and I tried to understand that, and then I found that in that impoverished, muddy, dusty, difficult circumstances of the Himalayas, that eye diseases were very prevalent. And so he did create a number of clinics for people to be treated with eye diseases in those very earliest days. So we move along, 1972. These pictures are from a little bit later time, but from the very beginning, very nearly the beginning, 72, the Institute, Swamiji wanted to create a residential program where people could practice in depth the teachings that he was giving them. And he could give some personal guidance, and they could help each other in developing themselves. So residential programs started. The first one, I think, was in Barrington, Illinois, in a rented farmhouse. Handful of residents lived there, moved on to Prospect Heights property, where it also existed. And he also was definitely bent on teaching teachers to teach yoga, because that was the way to reach others. And of course, whenever you become a teacher, you become even more of a student in that process. So it was clever of him to do that. And so he began that work, and also he introduced us to a little device called the neti pot for cleaning our noses and letting us breathe and let prana flow freely. So it wasn't so easy to go to Walgreens in those days and pick up a neti pot. In fact, impossible. So we had to make them ourselves, as we did with many things that we did at the Himalayan Institute. So as the center in the Chicago area was growing and expanding, Swamiji was still teaching ceaselessly everywhere. And 2 or 3 places he seemed to go often. One of them was Buffalo, New York. A number of students that came together there and asked him to come and to teach, and they provided places for him to teach. We have a lovely founding member from Buffalo Center, Bonnie Albert, who's going to talk with us a little later about those early days. And this center continues today, thriving. Rolf and Mary Gail Sovic looked after it for more than 20 years, and they moved here to join us. And then Jackie Bogdan now with a team of wonderful folks, including mostly volunteer teachers who really understand and imbibe the spirit of selfless service, who continue to help their community there. So, in 1973, the Himalayan Institute Teachers Association, which we sometimes used to abbreviate as HITA, H-I-H-T, was formally organized to train and inspire yoga teachers. Swamiji began that training right away, but here he really formally organized it. He wanted there to be lectures and careful curriculum planned. He laid it out for them in the beginning. I think Lad Koresh was the first president of the Himalayan Institute Teachers Association back in those days. They had retreats. They began to teach some of the more advanced practices that weren't available to others. Swamiji taught them in those days to them as they really began to do the practice. So it wasn't just go, read, go home. It was do the practice, and they did. So another way to share the knowledge was through many different publications over the years. The first one was actually The Voice of the Himalayas, down there in that lower right-hand corner. That was a publication by a Himalayan Institute in Kanpur, India. People in the US, people in India, Swamiji contributed to that publication. It was printed in India and sent over here to be shared, and we could hardly wait for the next volume to come. It was a wonderful, wonderful publication. And then we came up with Dawn magazine. Swamiji inspired us. There was a short period in the early 70s that it came out, and then again in the 1980s, it came back again as a membership publication, and also really full of what we were learning ourselves. The people who were writing the articles were our teachers, but learning as they went, and it was a really beautiful publication that expressed that. And then we had the Himalayan News, which was really a newspaper form that was published for 10 years and had not only our program schedule, but also all kinds of articles and recipes and things like that. And the quarterly guide that also was there. Thank you. Came out. So last but not least is the research bulletin. So you know Swamiji's bent on the scientific and medical community, teaching them, showing them, having them share the knowledge base and to actually practice and be able to share it with their students and clients. So the research bulletin grew out of that interest. We did all kinds of research on breathing practices. Dr. Ballantyne, sitting here in the front row, contributed in so many ways to that publication, designing experiments, bringing together the students, doing one set of experiments came out one way, then the next publication would be the next, series of events about what happened next. It was scientific, but also very interesting. And if you really read some of those articles, you understand why we actually do these things, why Swamiji was saying do it. It explained that in scientific form. So another really program of the Institute was excursions, spiritual pilgrimages and excursions, back to the Himalayas, back to India, back to where his life had begun and where these teachers lived. So I was lucky enough to be involved in 1974 in that trip to the Kumbh Mela in Haridwar, India. And about 100 students went. We stayed in the tourist bungalow behind the Shivananda ashram on the north side of Rishikesh. And occasionally we traveled down to Swamiji's ashram along the Ganga. These days, if you travel there, there's a dike that's been built along the Ganges to keep the floods from coming in. But in those days, it was just sand and stone. You could walk right down to the river and really touch that Mother Ganga. It was a beautiful experience. And he continued to inspire people to make that journey, because in that journey you leave behind your usual life, you step into a different type of world, step into that space where you can really create something new for yourself. And people used that experience in that way, and had wonderful adventures besides. So these trips are continuing. The latest things that we're doing now is a trip to Gangotri in the fall, and what we call the Khajuraho Sadhana immersion groups that go to our beautiful campus in Khajuraho, and also stop off sometimes to visit the other beautiful campus, Allahabad. So the Institute grew fast. Swamiji inspired that action. He brought students from all over the world. Everyone wanted to help in some way. And we outgrew our little rental facilities. For a time, Swamiji gave his larger lectures in the Flamingo Motel on Milwaukee Avenue in Wheeling. That's where I met him, actually. And it was just a big conference room, and it worked well for us in those days, but we really needed something different. So a group of students looked hard to try to find a place that could be a home for the Institute. And sure enough, a little property tucked behind the Naval Air Base and a nursing home that had been somewhat neglected and kind of forgotten in the corner of Glenview became the apple of our eye. And it needed a lot of attention to make it come alive again. And so in 1974, we purchased that property, and within a few months' time, transformed it into a living center. It was a building with classroom space. There was room for some people to stay overnight, but very few, not like here. There was a ranch house that became a medical clinic, and there was a small little cottage where some of the young men who were Swamiji's students lived, including my husband, Mick, who spent some time there, and perhaps some other people in this room who have shown up here in those early days. So the inauguration happened in May of 1975, and the story I like to tell about that is, Swamiji really encouraged us to reach our full capacity in whatever we did, and sometimes we felt like he was really stretching us just a little beyond where we really could meet. And so there were a lot of photo finishes to the work that we do at the Institute, and this was one of them. Around 11 o'clock the night before, he sent all the women home, and we walked out watching that there were still ladders. There were no ceiling tiles in yet. The wires were hanging down. There was no grass. There was no flagpole. And he worked all night with that group of young students and men to put it together. And when I came back at 9 in the morning, the grass was rolled out, the sprinklers were going, the flagpole was up with the flag on it. everything had been put in order, and they were setting up the chairs for the people who would be arriving soon to inaugurate the Institute. So, the other nice story about that time is it was a late spring, and there were two beautiful magnolia trees right behind the glass window behind the dais in the lecture hall. And the Institute's first chairman, and one of the women who really helped found the Institute, was Anne Aylward, and Swamiji called her Mama, and she was his mother in so many ways, and really birthed the Institute. So she said, "Oh, Swamiji, it's too bad those magnolias aren't blooming, it would be such a beautiful backdrop with you standing up there." And he said, "You'd like that? Would you really like that?" He said, "Wait and see." So sure enough, the next day, those tightly furled magnolia blossoms opened, and they were the perfect backdrop for everything that happened that day. Himalayan Institute of Pittsburgh, another thriving center that serves its community, still in existence. This is what I could find in the files. Some wonderful person saved some of these things from the earliest days. So here's the notice of their grand opening. And they have continued. There's never been a stop in them being able to provide yoga services. Swamiji loved to lecture in Pittsburgh. He loved the group there, and came often to visit with them, and really inspired them to keep that center going. So over the years, a number of wonderful folks have made that work, and today Kate Kill is our lovely director there, and she has a group of students and teachers who work together, bring in new people, flows. We send folks from here to teach occasionally, but they really have a beautiful operation there, and so many people from Pittsburgh come and join us here on a regular basis. It's a 5-hour drive, just like Buffalo, but they make it happen. So here we come to 1975. Back in Glenview, Swamiji wanted us to create a medical program, a health program for people that would bring the best of the East and the West together. And he asked Dr. Ballantyne to make that happen. And maybe he'll say a few words to us later about how that evolved. But he brought just the most basic reality of good food, good exercise, how do you breathe, what do you do with your mind, what do you do in difficult circumstances. Here are some cleansing practices to help you overcome the things that have already happened in your life. And put those things together with a little bit of homeopathy and a little bit of Ayurveda, and give people a new lease on life. And I don't know, many hundreds of people came through that little program in Glenview, and their lives were changed by it. And it became a model for all of the work that has gone forward, all of the medical work that Swamiji inspired and did through the Institute. And we still, today, have our Pure Rejuve Wellness Center going. And of course, there's just thousands of people who have really been had their suffering alleviated, and also been inspired to make lifestyle changes that have helped them in so many different ways. So the Institute was a little guy, really, until 1976, when we burst onto the world scene with an international yoga conference. And this was held in Chicago at the Palmer House. The group of board of directors and students at the Institute had a hard time envisioning how we could make it happen. But Swamiji invited someone named Dr. Mishra from India, who was in the habit of running enormous 10,000-person conferences on yoga in India. And he inspired, with Swamiji's help, everyone to say we could do it. And we did. Swamiji encouraged us to invite people from all walks of life, from all faiths, from the scientific community. There was even some folks from, some yogis who came and demonstrated some interesting abilities that they had. And we had a music presentation in the evening, and it was a wonderful 4 days of celebrating the yogic lifestyle and the way that it had burst into the world, in combining the scientific community, the medical community, and this ancient 5,000-year-old tradition. And it was a great deal of fun. Yeah. We went on to hold 19 of them and counting. I'm sure there'll be another one somewhere that comes along. And we held them in Chicago, in New York City, and then finally here in Honesdale. And all very well received. So, I think it was right after that conference that Swamiji returned to India and met Pandiji, who had been searching for him, preparing for him all his life. You can read in Touched by Fire and in the 11th hour, Pandiji's story of all the things that led him to be in a particular part of New Delhi, in a particular park, on a particular day, and in the right place to meet Swami Rama. And he's going to speak with us a little bit later. But we're very grateful that happened. And Swamiji, Swamiji was very tall. Pandiji is not so tall. But they used to walk together, and Swamiji put his arm around Pandiji, and he would just be right up by his heart. And he's still walking there today. So, these are interesting pictures. In 1977, really that year, we outgrew Glenview. And that happened in 2 years' time. We had a graduate program, a little mini graduate program going on. We had the combined therapy program going on. We were producing publications, making neti pots, holding classes, holding conferences, and more and more students were coming. And Swamiji now said, okay, we need a bigger place. And I need something grand, someplace where I can expand and we can do our work properly. So a search went on, and mostly people were searching around the Chicago area because that's where we were, and we wanted the Institute to be in the Chicago area. But there were some other students who were looking a little farther abroad, and they managed to find this place sitting empty for 6 or 7 years. And it had been a seminary for the Fathers of the Sacred Heart, a group of priests out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of all places, who ended up here. And they built this beautiful, magnificent building. They used it from 1955 to about 1971. That's when the last class graduated from here. And then it sat empty till 1977, waiting for us. And I like that the last class was in 1971, and that was the year the Himalayan Institute was founded. So, meant to be. That picture is from 1955. You can see the little tiny trees out front that have grown into mighty blue spruces and what it looked like then. And that picture next to it is of Swamiji welcoming the local folks of Honesdale to the open house that was held here in the spring of 1978. Yeah. Next year, 40 years here in Honesdale. How about that? So, Swamiji was also working, in addition to helping us buy a property here in Honesdale, on a book, a master book, Living with the Himalayan Masters. And this book is a joy to every person in this room and probably every person watching out there. It's the story of Swamiji's life growing up in the Himalayas, and he tells it in a way that becomes a teaching story. He tells it as him learning some things as he went along the way from his many, many teachers, and it's really meant also for us as a learning story. The thing about that book is the more you read it, the more you learn. It's like you go back to it a few years later, you learn something different than you learned the first time. It has that magic to it. So he wrote this book largely in Glenview, sometimes tucked into a little tiny room called the Onion Room that was a pantry off of the kitchen and the Glenview property. But he liked that place because he said it reminded him of his cave. So we continued to grow. And here we are in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. How are we going to reach our students? So one idea came, well, why don't we put some kind of Himalayan Institute event and place in New York City? So we found a beautiful place to rent on Fifth Avenue, right near the Village. And in 1978, East West Books and the Himalayan Institute of New York opened. And they served the city for more than 20 years. Swamiji would hold lectures there that would overflow the rooms so that then we'd have to rent other spaces. East West Books was a beacon for many years for books that you couldn't buy anything on Amazon in those days. It didn't exist yet. So the interesting, esoteric yoga books that we wanted to get, East West Books found them for us and kept them in stock. But things changed, and over the years, the cost of renting a space on Fifth Avenue in New York changed, and also our focus changed in what we were doing and what Swamiji was really planning to do going forward. And so at some point, that enterprise came to an end, but all those students and teachers, many of them ended up here, and many of them continue with their yoga studios and send students here, and we have a beautiful sharing that goes back and forth between New York and Honesdale. Another event of 1978. So we had been printing publications on little printing presses back even in the Glenview days. I can't remember, it was a very little small press, but first our newsletters, and then occasionally they tried to put together a book there. But we reached a point where we had more and more publications, not only by Swamiji, but other teachers, and we really needed some way to get those out. So Swamiji suggested that we create our own printing press, and we did. Bought a beautiful Heidelberg printing press, which was a state-of-the-art press at the time, and folders and gatherers and cutting machines. And part of living at the Himalayan Institute was helping to put together the books. We would have book binding parties, and there was usually popcorn, and all kinds of beautiful publications came through there. We started out here at renting a little space in Honesdale, and then converted our barn here on campus to hold these machines and the people who would operate them. And finally, Pandiji came to the West. And I think he came in the fall of 1979. Yeah. And I was in Glenview at that time, and Pandiji came for a visit in the spring or summer when Swamiji was visiting in Glenview. He came first to the U.S. and he went first to Minneapolis. Pandiji wanted him to teach and learn and get used to American culture there. And there were some wonderful folks who are here today who helped him with that process. And then he came for a visit. And on that visit, I think that was the time that he was still learning English and figuring out how he could express all the things that were in his heart and mind. And Swamiji had a habit of helping people who he wanted to teach with that by helping them to get over themselves, which was more or less, I'm lecturing, I'm supposed to be lecturing, but no, I'm not going to lecture, you are going to lecture. Go out and speak to the crowd. And that's what he did with Pandiji. And Pandiji said, oh my gosh, everyone's expecting Swamiji. What will I talk about? I don't, but he did. He got through it beautifully, actually, and communicated as much with his heart as he did with his words. And that's what I remember about Pandiji, meeting you that time. You were just shining, coming from India with all of your practice and all of your love for Swamiji. It was a very special time. So, the next slide here. We had, for a long time, Swamiji was trying to find a way to present an organized graduate program for the study of yoga. And he wanted it to be an accredited program so people could earn actual degrees. We started out with a simple certificate kind of program at the Glenview Center, but it was really of master's degree quality work. And when we moved to Honesdale, we sort of needed to get this place going and running. And then the possibility of creating this graduate school rose again. And a number of teachers and directors here partnered with the University of Scranton to create a master's program in Eastern Studies and Comparative Psychology. And it began in 1981. And we had an illustrious faculty of doctors and physicians and yoga teachers who were present the things that they knew the best and to develop very systematic and rigorous teaching programs for the students who came here. And so we began in the fall of 1981 with a small class. And we actually have an alumnus of that program here who will talk to you in a little bit. Aradna Petrazak was in that first class. The thing I remember about that program is it was very experiential. And one of the practices was determining which nostril was open before you ate your meal, as it was a good idea for the right nostril to be open. So the practice was bring a little hand mirror with you to the meal, and blow into it, and you can see which nostril was predominant at that time. And if it wasn't the right one, then you needed to use a practice to open your right nostril. So we went through quite a few classes of that, practicing that. And in addition to that, wonderful people, that idea of inspired service, that you come to learn, but you also give something back. So those folks, in addition to doing a full-time, rigorous program, also contributed in different ways to the Institute, helping to wash dishes, helping to prep vegetables, helping to put books together. And it was really that holistic way of living and learning together that made us a community. It was a beautiful experience. So, around the early 80s, Swamiji started to turn his attention a little bit more back to the East. And a number of circumstances led him to be able to create a beautiful, dreamlike ashram on a hill outside of Kathmandu in Nepal called Hansda Ashram. It was a little short period of time, just a couple of years that it existed, but those who were fortunate enough to spend time there, including Rolf Sovik here, Virat, Xavier, spent a good deal of time with him there. And many of you in this room traveled there and visited there. Swamiji was very available and in his element. So people report wonderful, inspiring lectures, and he would walk with them in the hills each morning, and he kept them to a very rigorous practice. He had a serious schedule that they needed to follow while they were there, and people talk about it transforming their lives. Sometime 1984 or so, the political situation changed drastically in Nepal, and it wasn't possible to continue the ashram there. And Swamiji basically picked up his bag, threw his shoulder around himself, and said, "Leave it, let's go." And he went on to the next thing, as he often did. That next thing turned out to be an enormous project. Swamiji often talked about bringing the best of the East to the West. Well, now the second part of his mission was to take the best of the West back to the East. And he envisioned a medical city in the Garhwal region of India, lower Himalayas, foothills, that had no modern medical care. And he cajoled and inspired and worked tirelessly with those on the Indian side as well as those on the American side to realize this dream. And he did, and it exists. Over the years, the last 20 years or so, it has continued to grow and expand. And today, there's not only a hospital, but a medical college, a nursing college, Ayurvedic center, cancer research center, rural development program. There's a Swami Rama Center. And this work continues to serve thousands and thousands of people in need in that area, and is actually one of the top medical colleges and top hospitals in India today. So, beautiful work. Wow, Yoga International magazine. That was an era here at the Institute. I'm looking at the editor of the magazine, Deborah Willoughby, and knowing what that relentless cycle of every 2 months producing an amazing, inspiring magazine was like. It was a joy and also a very challenging work that transformed everyone who was involved in it. Swamiji created this magazine to promote the authentic teachings and practice of yoga. The sharing of existing faiths and religions, and for individuals' growth on 3 levels: spiritual, mental, and physical. And Yoga International evolved in so many different ways over the years. And this year is actually its 25th anniversary. So in many different areas, printed publications have ceased to exist. Instead of ceasing to exist, we took ourselves virtual and exist now more robustly than we ever could before in printed version online with the Yoga International website, where an archive of yoga classes and amazing presentations exist, as well as new material that comes out pretty much every day. So a really wonderful realization of that dream. So in 1993, I think Swamiji couldn't really tell us exactly what the future would hold, but I think he knew. And so in that year, he, before he left for India, he appointed Pandiji to be his successor as the spiritual head of the Institute, if and when that time came when it was needed. And Pandiji readily accepted that role. And thankfully, he continues to carry on to be the representative and really the flame of that 5,000-year tradition. And continues to share so generously with us all of what he knows and has learned over the years. Yeah. Here in 1994, Pandiji was presented with an award by the President of India. And I don't know what that award is, but it was probably for his humanitarian work with the hospital and really all over India. But it was a very prestigious event, and Swamiji was glowing, and I think accepting it on behalf of that tradition that he represented. So in 1996, he exhausted himself in so many ways, and yet it was an endless, boundless river of energy, dichotomy in some ways. And in 1996, he completed his work in this world, and he left his body at the hospital site on November 13th. You can read more about the events that led up to that and the events that happened afterwards in Pandiji's book, At the 11th Hour, and also in Touched by Fire. That evening, soon after we gathered together here, right here in this auditorium, and shared our memories and our gratitude, and recognized that his work and his energy with us goes on. And we feel it still every day here. Great man. So our work continued. Pandiji inspired some herbalists who had come to live at the Institute to begin to use the science of Ayurveda in practical ways to serve people. So we created a line of herbal products called Varchoveda Botanicals that had the ability to help people heal, and especially to the energy from those herbs worked within the body to create healing experience, but also to raise energy and to actually be a kind of an adjunct to our meditation practice, because there are certain herbs that help the mind in that way. And that herbal products were actually made here for some time, and we've gone on to continue with other products. And today our Triphala oil and our Triphala capsules and our Chavan Prash product continue to help people in that same way. All right, so work on this side of the globe was going quite well, and it seemed like people were very curious about India and our homeland, and also there was a Mahakumbh Mela coming up in Allahabad on the banks of the Ganges, a great spiritual festival that we wanted to be a part of. So Pandiji inspired us here to do a little bit of thinking about how we'd like to use our resources, and we were able to find a beautiful property right along the Ganges and create the Allahabad campus. And it's okay. What I can say about that is it started out being a very kind of left behind property. We seem to enjoy those here at the Institute. We find some place that needs to be nurtured and loved and has great potential. And Swamiji, Pandiji saw that, and inspired us to move forward. So similarly with the Allahabad campus, it had been empty for some time and had gullies and some issues with it, but it also had a vibrant, alive energy. And it was a place of practice for Swamiji and his master in years before. So through a lot of hard work by a lot of people, we were able to attain that property and build this beautiful guest house. And it exists today as an oasis on earth. If you drive into the gate of the Allahabad campus, you feel like you have left the earth and gone to heaven. It's a beautiful campus with trees and birds and the spirit of yoga energy there. Wow. Okay, so 1999, that sounds like a long time ago, but it wasn't so long ago that the Himalayan Institute needed to have a website. Right? Can you imagine those days before everyone had a website? Now everyone does. And our very first Himalayan Institute front page is right there. It was a lot of effort by a lot of people to create a new department, and it was a way to reach many, many thousands more people than we had ever been able to reach before, and has grown now to a great deal of, so many people visit our website. Yoga International spun off from that, and we're in the process right now of recreating the website. So within a few months, we're going to be seeing the new website of the Himalayan Institute with more archive materials, more live classes, and another way for us to stay in touch with you on a regular basis. So, another great milestone in 2001, that Kumbh Mela, Maha Kumbh Mela that I mentioned to you, happened in India. And the Institute took 500 students all at once to India. We developed the Allahabad campus into a city of tents and cottages, and people lived for 3 weeks or so in a simple way, as probably yogis had been doing for quite a long time before that. A few amenities, but mostly a very simple lifestyle. And Pandiji brought the best of the Kumbh Mela to us at the Allahabad campus. Teachers from all over came to speak and share their knowledge with us. And Pandiji also taught every day on the banks of the Ganga. There's probably a lot of folks in this room who attended that program and received a lot of benefit from it. Also at this Kumbh Mela, Pandiji wanted to host the Dalai Lama, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and our campus was a little too small to make that work, and also there were security issues, so we worked with Swami Avdeshananda to hold the program at his campus, and there they are, addressing a very large crowd at the Kumbh Mela on the future of humanity and the ways that we can work together and inspire each other for peace in the world. The next milestone. So Pandiji came back from that Kumbh Mela very energized and had a suggestion. He wanted us to reach out to our local community in an even more serious way than we ever had before. And so we opened a yoga studio and a cafe and a bookstore on Main Street in Honesdale. And it was quite a grand event. There we are with the ribbon cutting ceremony. And there were yoga classes held on the second floor. And one of the things that not very many people in Honesdale had sampled chai before, but it became a daily habit for many people in Honesdale after the Institute Cafe introduced that. And the third floor, we had offices because we were continuing to grow and actually couldn't accommodate everything here on campus. So we used that building from top to bottom in many good ways. Take over? Yes, so Ishan, I'd like to turn it over to you now. Carry us forward from 2004.
Thanks, Sujata. One quick note about this slide. For those of you who are joining us live stream or who haven't been to HI in a while, you will recall that HI Main Street was closed for a number of years, but we're very proud that it recently reopened under the auspices of Yoga International just a few weeks ago, really, about a month ago. So if you haven't checked out our former HI Main Street, which is now Yoga International, please do. You'll be really proud of what's there. You know, it's humbling to have listened to the last hour reflections from a time before I was even born. And from about the early 2000 onward, was a period of exceptional growth. And the 2004 Sacred Link Conference held here in Honesdale represented the culmination of a number of years of 100-plus city tours every summer from 2001 onwards, and also was really the kickoff of a very significant global expansion of the Institute's work. It was the monsoon conference, as many of us called it here, in the intense storm, but brought together a whole range of presenters from around the world and shared the beginnings of a vision that would take the Institute global in a much larger way. Part of that expansion happened very mysteriously, very spontaneously, when Oprah decided to feature the neti pot on her show. When we first got the phone call, everyone thought it was a prank call. And thank God someone took it seriously and took the call, because they just basically give you a 24-hour notice or some very short notice that they're going to do it. And, and it was pretty spectacular what happened after. The website crashed Neti Pot sales went through the roof. And Neti Pot went national. And the Neti Pots that you see today all around the country in every Walgreens and CVS and everywhere else, in large part really exploded after this period. And it also was very fortuitously timed in that it financially allowed us to undertake a number of remarkable projects, both here in Honesdale and around the world. The first one being the launch of our very first center and humanitarian project in Africa at HI Cameroon. And this center and this project really represented the beginning of a very significant expansion into community development and humanitarian efforts globally. As you've seen, Institute has been undertaking humanitarian work in the East for many, many decades. And there was a strong desire in the early 2000s, starting from that Sacred Link Conference forward, to search for a home where we could really develop a new vision for social empowerment that's really rooted in our yogic lifestyle and vision for personal empowerment. And that's what HI Cameroon was. And it's celebrating its 10th anniversary next year and has flourished beyond our imagination today, serving literally hundreds of thousands of people throughout this entire region. 2007 was a very busy year. Not only was it the year that we launched HI Cameroon, but it was the year, it was our very first Akhanda Japa, continuous group meditation. It began, I believe, in the fall, November 2007. And it wasn't just a year-long meditation, it was 52 consecutive weekend programs taught by Pandiji. It brought together our community in a very phenomenal way, and it was a really, really powerful catalyst for many things to come thereafter. In 2009, the Institute founded a project in Mexico, in Puebla. This project centered around organic farming and community gardening and a number of health initiatives. This project was very successful, in fact, so successful that it attracted the attention of some very large NGO partners that were Mexican, very well-established Mexican NGOs, who adopted the project formally and absorbed it into their broader network, which allowed this project to reach almost throughout the entire country thereafter. 2010 was a very, very big year for the Institute with the Living Tantra program. The first Living Tantra, as many of you who are here will remember, was actually in 1998 and 99. And that was in the pre-digital era. And when Living Tantra was re-envisioned, it was envisioned as our very first hybrid live and digital course. And that was our first real foray into the idea of hybrid education. And it was a phenomenal success. Well over 1,000 students took part in this program, and it revitalized the Institute in an extraordinary way, in particular also by bringing it to many, many different cities around the country and around the world. And definitely was the foundation for the expansion of Yoga International that we'll talk about in a minute. In 2010, we were also very fortunate to host the Prime Minister of the Tibetan Exile Government, Samdang Rinpoche, here in Honesdale. And that sparked a beautiful collaborative project with the Tibetan Exile Government, where we worked in a number of their settlements in South India, working primarily with organic farming, tree plantation, and biodiesel tree plantation. A project as well that was very successful and officially adopted by the Tibetan Exile Government and continues today under their efforts. 2012, before we talk about the Khajuraho campus, it really was based, again, on the tremendous energy and vitality generated by a second year-long Akhanda Japa, which was from November 2012 through November 11, 2013. Sorry, November 2011 through November 13, 2012. So that year of 2012 was the year of Akhanda Japa here in Honesdale, and a year of extraordinary work in India. I wasn't able to be part of the group meditation here very much because I was on the ground in India almost the entire year, developing this extraordinary campus in Khajuraho. I first remember hearing about the idea of a campus in Khajuraho in passing, and I really had no idea at the time what it all meant until the time came to create this campus and the shrine. I'm sure many of you in this audience or online might have visited during the Kumbh Mela or the Khajuraho Sadhana immersion. And if not, we certainly invite you to experience this extraordinary campus and its vitality and spiritual energy. The campus was ostensibly built, or at least the timing of it was aligned for the Kumbh Mela in January 2013. And it was the 12-year anniversary of our first Kumbh Mela that Sujata told you about in 2001. And it, again, was a grand gathering. Over 500 students from around the world joined us, living in an eco-village, both in Allahabad and in Khajuraho. And I wasn't able to be there for the first Mahakumbh Mela in 2001 because I was in college, and I think I got the full dose of whatever I had missed by being part of 2013. It was truly an extraordinary experience, and again, the launching point for a lot of the work that's unfolded in India from since. In 2013, we were really going through a deep process of understanding what we wanted to do with the magazine, and observing that most single publication magazines, niche magazines, either had to sell themselves to a larger group and in large part lose their identity, or try and find, in fact, there really was no or. Most magazines just gently tapered away, and we thought that that wasn't the future for YI. We wanted YI not just to survive, but to thrive. So we took the bold move of taking Yoga International online. Initially, people thought of it more as an online magazine, but really what we've seen it unfold into is much more than a magazine, but a complete online platform for yoga practice and community. There's nearly 1 million Facebook members of YI today, and well over 1 million visits per month to the website. So it's absolutely one of the leading online yoga platforms, and I think this is just the beginning for what we'll see from YI. 2014 was also an excellent and unique year in that it was the launch of the Secret of the Yoga Sutra book and 90-city lecture tour. This lecture tour invigorated our membership on many levels, and it reminded us of those wonderful lecture tours in the early 2000s. Several thousand people, I think easily 5,000 to 10,000 people were impacted directly by this lecture tour. The second part of the book is coming soon. That's probably the most frequently asked question. And this time soon really is soon. Soon means by spring 2017. The last year and a half really has been a period of extraordinary growth here in Honesdale and abroad. And I think organizations, just like people, go through midlife retransformations. I certainly wouldn't call it a crisis, but it's a time to reinvent yourself. And the Institute really embodies that wonderfully. There's so many things which have unfolded in the last 2 years that it's even difficult to mention. But for those of you who are joining us after many years here in person, I'm sure you'll notice a number of beautiful changes to the physical facility here in the retreat center. We made a conscious effort to try and find a way to introduce more people to this extraordinary environment about a year ago, and opening up the Institute's retreat center as a much more open platform for yoga teachers and presenters from a number of related areas to join. And this year we have over 135 events being hosted here at HI Retreat Center, and I'm sure 2017 will have even more. So it's been a year of wonderful expansion, inviting more people to be part of this community and here. The launch of purejuve.com, which is the online extension of our Pure Juve Wellness Center. Yoga International absolutely exploding on the web. And our Khajuraho Sadhana Immersion, which we concluded earlier this year. So it's been an extraordinary year, and I think for us the 45th anniversary is, as I mentioned before, just the warm-up for the 50th anniversary, and much more to come. And really the theme of our efforts the last 2 years have been about achieving mission focus and sustainability so that we can be here, not just for the 50th anniversary, but for the next 50 years thereafter, and find ways to be even more relevant and available for people wherever they are. So with that, we come to today, June 23rd, 2016, our 45th anniversary. And from here, what I'd love to do is to invite a number of presenters to come forward and share their reflections and thoughts about what the last 45 years has meant to them. I suppose in almost all the cases, truly 45 years, because many of the people who will be presenting to us have been there from the beginning or for a long period of time. In other cases, people who might be newer to the Institute, but but for whom the Institute has touched them deeply, and who we invited to share their thoughts and reflections. To begin, I'd like to invite Dr. Rolf Sovik, who's been an integral part of the Institute since the early 1970s. I think most of you are aware that Rolf is our spiritual director and president. Rolf was the director of HI Buffalo from 1991 to 2011, our spiritual director since 1999, and our president since 2008.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. It's quite a remarkable occasion, actually. Can you hear me all right? It's quite a remarkable occasion to remember back, and after going through those slides and thinking back at the history, and thinking that for at least some of us who were there the whole time, it makes us rather old-timers. I remember when I first had the opportunity to meet Swami Rama. It was in 1972. And at that time, he gave a lecture in Minneapolis called Biofeedback, Yoga of the West, which was a little of an exaggeration. Biofeedback was a tool that he was working with at that time, following up on his experiments in the Himalayan the Menninger Foundation. But following his lecture, I was quite sure that half of Minneapolis would be breaking down the doors to see him. It turned out 40 people showed up for a weekend workshop in December of 1972. And at that workshop, he gave each person who was there the opportunity to sit down with him privately and do an EEG scan, a scan of brain waves, which he would then analyze privately with you in a small room. So my meeting with him was sitting down on one side of a coffee table with a long scroll of EEG feedback between us, and he was on the other side. He looked at that scroll, then he looked at me, then he looked at the scroll again for a while, then he looked at me and he quietly said, "Are you married?" I thought, is there something about marriage in that EEG readout? But I said no, and he said, "You should get married," which solved one problem in my life. Then he looked again for a while, and he asked the question, "Do you meditate?" That question caught me off guard, because I had tried to meditate a little bit, had thought that I was not really getting very far with it, but I wasn't about to say yes, and I wasn't about to say no. So in the extremely short amount of time that you have to formulate an answer, I came up with the answer, "Not really." And he looked at me and he said, "You should learn to meditate. I'll teach you." That was the end of the story for me. That's all I needed to hear. He did. And I'm sure that there were others in this room who he taught as well in the same way. That he paid attention, and at certain crucial points in life, he was there and available to lead you forward. One of those times occurred for Mary Gail and me when we were in Chicago visiting him. And he said, "Would you like to run a health food store?" My health food store experience was absolutely zero, and my running a business was just below that. But when he asked the question, it seemed like a plausible thing to do for some reason. So I said, "Sure, yes, we would like to do it." So the next weekend, Mary Gail and I had flown back to Minneapolis, and we were out driving in the car, just simply driving in the automobile in the afternoon. She said, "Let's go to the health food store and have a look." So I thought, yeah, great. They don't know whether we're going to buy this health food store or run it or what they're going to do. They're going to be angry. They'll be mad at us for making. Mary Gail said, "Let's just go to the health food store. Stop thinking too much." So we went, and she went in to buy some milk. And a few moments later, she popped her head out the door and went like this, waved me to come in. At that point, a larger head loomed over the top of hers and motioned like this too. It was Swami Rama. I thought, what an amazing coincidence this is. So I went in, we had a carrot juice, we talked about the health food store, he said some nice things, and we left. And a few weeks later, I saw a man named Roger Jones, who was the head of the Minnesota Dental Association. He was the person who had picked Swami Rama up from the airport that day. And I said, what a coincidence that we should be at the health food store when Swamiji was there. And Roger said, coincidence, I picked him up at the airport. He said, I've got to go to the health food store to meet Rolf and Mary Gail. And that was it. I'm sure that if we were to solicit stories, we'd get tons of stories like that. There's a Sufi story about a fakir who goes into a bank. He says to the teller, I'd like to cash a check. And the bank teller says, fine, we need 2 forms of ID. And so the fakir takes out a credit card from his wallet, and he holds the credit card out, and she says, yes, that's perfect. Now I need just one more kind. So he reaches into his wallet, pulls out a small mirror, looks at it, and he says, yes, it's me. It's a more complicated story than you'd think, actually. It's a story about objective knowledge and subjective knowledge. Swamiji seemed to be the master of both kinds. And if you look at the Manager Foundation record, although he did accomplish those things, it was not so much the what or the how that he did it, as it was the when that he did it. He did it at a time in which people were beginning to reflect on the possibility of new ways of knowing oneself. That new way of knowing oneself is exactly what the world needed at that point. We had just been through a horrible war. There were great doubts about how it was the truth could be obtained in the universe. There were people who were searching for new psychologies, new philosophies, and there were people using psychedelic drugs to try to find something which didn't seem very apparent to anybody. And so it was that Swamiji brought an answer to a series of questions, all of which needed answering at precisely that time. It was not only the how and the what, but the when. At precisely that moment, there seemed to be an appearance of a force, really, a force that governed a seeking population. That force germinated into these slides, and it will continue to unwind, I'm sure. So I have no doubt that the work of this institute is in good hands with Pandiji, with Ishan, with others here who have turned the campus into a really wonderful garden of not only plants and flowers, but a garden of thoughts and feelings. And so I'm very grateful to have been part of the Institute over these 45 years and happy to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Rolf. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Rudolph Ballantyne, a name who is, for many of us who are newer to the Institute, legendary, and many of you who are newer haven't had the opportunity to meet Dr. B in person. But from the reflections that Sujata shared, he was an integral part of the force which brought the Institute where it is today. Dr. Ballantyne is a pioneer in the field of integrative health, a prolific author and teacher, and served as a member of the HI Board of Directors and faculty from 1974 to 1993, and was the president of the board from 1981 to 1993. Dr. B, we're very grateful to have you here with us today.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be back in this auditorium. I can't tell you how many times I walked down this aisle and came up to speak. And to reflect on, all these years of the Institute being here and doing its work, and to reflect on Swamiji's generous time. He came to this country already a very prominent figure in India with great prestige and status. And he started in Chicago with nothing, because, as someone said, he came to Japan with $2 in his pocket, or $4 or whatever it was, and then he got to the U.S. Again, he left behind everything in Japan. And, you know, from the stories I heard from Swamiji, he was on the street, didn't really have anything. So in his calmly and competent way, he thought, well, I have to have a place to sleep. So he started doing card tricks on the street. Well, you know, he had an advantage because he could sort of know what cards people were looking at. And so this pretty quickly managed to put enough money in his pocket to get a room. And then another tale he told about that period was when he got to Chicago was that he was in south side of Chicago, and these two guys came along and sort of mugged him, you know, or tried to mug him. Well, he actually had trained in Kung Fu and had a very advanced rank in that tradition, and so he kind of flipped them over. And they said, "How'd you do that?" And he said, "Well, it's Kung Fu." And they said, "Would you show us?" He said, "Sure." So he started teaching them. And this way, literally this way, he accumulated a few people, and then a few more people, and then a few more people. And over a relatively short period of time, he had a following in Chicago who were very devoted to him for such reasons, you know. And so from that, he built within, well, that was 1960-something, 66, 69. And by 1978, he'd purchased this campus from his supporters, raised money from his supporters. He kept telling us, you know, this is your place, come on, help. And we did. So it was interesting to watch, and I've had so much time now to reflect on how he approached this immense challenge and how he accomplished so much in such a short period of time. And how he did it was he took a group of kind of goofy, you know, confused young people, and he started from scratch. And he worked with us, and he, as he used to say, changed our diapers, you know, like dealing with all of our problems. He would sit in the kitchen, this is after we came to this place. He'd sit in the kitchen, often on the floor, and talk with people from 6 in the morning till 2 at night, 2 a.m., one after the other. And whatever problems and whatever you were going through, he was kind of, all right, you know, he would work with you, you know, okay, get Dr. B to give you a remedy, go do this practice, get out, come back, you know, whatever. And built us, little by little, into, you know, you thought it would never happen, but we became solid teachers who could represent, to some extent, the amazing things that he knew. And this way the Institute grew and has grown. And I remember one of the yoga teachers who, I won't give you his name, but he came to see me as a patient from one of the other big centers here on the East Coast. And he asked me, Swamiji wasn't here, It was during the winter when he was in India. And he said, how does he do that? How does he leave? I can't go anywhere. I'm captive. I have to be there all the time. And I thought, wow, yeah, he put a lot of time into teaching and training and building the people that are now doing the work. Infinite patience. I can't wrap my mind around the level of patience that he had. And, 20 years he sat on the floor doing this. I mean, how people say, well, he was a man of great powers and he could do all kinds of amazing things, and he could. But some of those things dwarf in comparison to sitting on the floor for 20 years and helping people with their stupid problems, year after year after year after year, until finally they could stand up straight and do something. I think the debt of gratitude that we owe to him is just immeasurable. And for those of you who have learned here, you owe that debt too. Because without him, this wouldn't be happening. And so I feel like on this anniversary, I really want to remember all that love and work and patience and care and love and work and many other things that went into building this community and this institution in this country. And I want to remember the teachers that came before him. Because what I'm talking about here is someone who lived the teachings. He didn't just get up and lecture and tell you these things that he'd heard, which sometimes is what is being offered. But no, he was the teachings. He embodied the teachings. He lived them always. Maybe sometimes we couldn't understand what he was doing. So he left a legacy. The legacy is, I still ponder things. Well, Swamiji said that. What on earth could he have meant? And then, 10 years later, one day I go, I got it. Now I understand. After much life experience, I can look back and understand some of the things he said and did that I couldn't understand then. And many of us are still learning. I met this yogi 5 years ago in Rishikesh. Someone took me and said, I want you to meet my teacher. So I went, and he was a very sweet man, and he'd been sitting there in Rishikesh for like 50 years. And so we kind of sizing each other up, and yeah. And I mentioned that my teacher had been Swami Rama. And he said, oh, he was a very powerful man. I said, yeah, I know. And he had been there when Swamiji was there. And I said, yes, I learned so much from him. He taught me so much. And he looked at me and he said, he's still teaching you. And I went, oh, that's true. So this is a rare and wonderful thing that we have that has been given to us from Swamiji and from his teacher and from his teacher's teacher and from his teacher's teacher. A wisdom that can be lived and that can only really be fully understood by living it and living it. And that's a rare thing in this world we live in now. People talk many things, but who lives them? So I'm very grateful that this work is being ably continued by Pandiji and all of you who are here on the staff. I'm very grateful that we have had this transfusion of authentic spirituality into our country. And I am very delighted to see and hopeful to see it continue to spread and grow as he intended. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Dr. Ballantyne. It's a very fortuitous opportunity that Dr. Ballantyne was able to be with us. In fact, he's just on his way back to Asheville as we speak to get there by later tonight for teaching engagement tomorrow morning. So, yeah, thank you for being here with us, Dr. Ballantyne. Next, I'd like to invite Deborah Willoughby to share some of her thoughts and reflections with us. Deborah has been in residence at the Institute since 1991. Board member, faculty, president of the Institute from 1994 to 2008, and founding editor of Yoga International from 1991 to 2007. Very much like Sujatha and like many of our resident and community here in numerous roles and in numerous ways. Deborah, would you please come forward and share some of your thoughts with us?
I'll try. It's a pleasure to be here and see so many of you. Some who I haven't seen for a long time, so welcome. I'm going to pick up the narrative where Dr. Ballantyne left off, in the sense that by the time I arrived at the Institute in 1991, all of those misfits and confused young people, not all of them, but many of them, had been patiently molded into skilled teachers, and there was a dynamic residential community here. Virat and Kieran weren't here. They were up in Buffalo, running the Buffalo Center at that time, but I'm looking at other people right here in the front couple of rows who were here when I got here. And just to give a little context to some of the things that Sujatha was saying through all that timeline so that you really understand what was going on here in the early 90s, this was an incredibly self-sufficient and self-contained community. It did everything for itself. We had our own auto shop. We repaired all of our own cars and tractors because we had a skilled mechanic in residence. We did all of our own carpentry work and remodeling work, all the things that you see now that we bring outside contractors to do, we did ourselves. The other thing that we did is we did all of our domestic chores ourselves. Anything that kept the Institute going, we did it. And we did it, or they did it, because this is what was going on when I came. They did it by everybody. There was no concept of your life and your work. It was what Sujatha was talking about, the inspired self-service that was going on. So people just did anything that was necessary to do to keep the community going. So everybody who was in residence had a dish shift. They do 1 to 2 dish shifts a week at least. And then everybody also had a kitchen duty. Petra was running the kitchen then, and with a itinerant volunteer, so she didn't really have a trained professional staff. She's keeping the kitchen going. And one of the reasons she was able to do that was because all of the residents had a kitchen duty. That would range from something like serving meals, or all the way to something really complicated like making bread or making yogurt. So everybody did that, and that was at least once a week, sometimes every day. And then the other thing was everybody who lived in the main building had a housekeeping task. Mira Delahunt, who's sitting down here, was the head of housekeeping, small but mighty. She could keep this whole building clean with an itinerant staff of volunteers. When she didn't have enough volunteers to do it, she did it herself. And she did it while she was also pulling long reception shifts, because we only had one phone line in here from outside. And reception, and that phone was answered at reception, except at night it was switched to a night line and rang in Swamiji's secretary's room. But that reception was manned 7 days a week, 13 hours a day. And so we had to do that. And I remember Mira being really instrumental at sitting at reception. So that's the context. That's the community that I arrived in 1991. And into this community, which was already working, well, the other thing that we did, Sujata alluded to this, but we printed all of our own books. I mean, everything, from typesetting, everything, all the way down to the, press up in the barn, we had an astonishing array of equipment for cutting and trimming and binding and all of that. Mick Grady was great at doing that. We did all of our own typesetting. Swamiji had sent Darlene Clark to Reading in the early 80s and got her trained on a typesetting machine. She was really skilled at it by the time I got here, and so was Mira Tiganayat, which is something that most people don't know, but Mira Tiganayat did a lot of typesetting in those days. So anyway, into this community that was already experienced itself as stretched to the max, the way Sujata talked about, we were always working right at the edge of our capacity. Swamiji introduces Yoga International. We had a large network of centers, and the Institute was well known, and there were we had a lot of books, and they were being distributed, and they sold well. And we did our own book distributing from the barn. But Swamiji, looking into the future as he had a way of doing, could see that yoga, which was not even remotely mainstream, most people hadn't even heard of yoga at that time, was about to enter the popular imagination. So he wanted, and he was concerned in his words, that this great science was going to be trivialized and watered down and commercialized. And he wanted to create a vehicle for the authentic and deeper teachings of yoga, and a place where people from all traditions and anybody who was interested in self-discovery could find the teachings and their teachers. And what he wanted a newsstand magazine. He didn't want, before that, the Institute publications had all gone to our own mailing list, Dawn and the Institute Quarterly, those kinds of things. But he wanted this to go out into the larger population. He wanted mainstream magazine. He came up with the idea before I got here. He'd come back that winter, and I think it was in December of 1990, and inspire the Institute residents to start working on getting this magazine out. And he wanted he wanted the publication date to be July 1992, which meant that the magazine had to go to press at the end of May. So, okay, so in this atmosphere, 2 weeks after I got here, the first Iraq War started. Swamiji called Pandiji and told him to write a book on yoga and war, and to do it right now, yesterday, last week, and that he wanted it published. What did he say, a month or something? That might have been generous. He wanted it published in a month. Now, we had a press, so we could run it off ourselves, and people were used to coming up nights and weekends doing whatever to get a book, but it first had to be written. So So Pandiji started writing this book, and he did it by dictating it to me. So he's writing this book, dictating it to me. I'm editing it. We can't get it onto the press because we can't get it into the queue. So Madalasa figures out how to do it on a computer. That was the first time that we stepped away from the typesetting system. So I remember coming down after prayers, 10 o'clock at night, and seeing Madalasa and Pandiji sitting in Madalasa's office, figuring out how to typeset that book on a computer. So fine, we did it. We got it out. I don't know if it was a month, but it was pretty close. Yeah, so we got it out on time, and Pandiji decided, okay, now I'm in the mood to write books. So he he decides to write that was called The Tradition of the Himalayan Masters. He'd come up with this idea the first time he wanted to do a multi-year seminar. He'd come up with a series of, I can't remember what it was, I think 8 seminars over 2 years. And this book was going to be the book that was the companion to that. So Pandiji and I are merrily writing this book, or Pandiji's writing the book, and I'm taking dictation. And Mandalas is preparing to now hone her skills to get the book published better. And Swamiji comes back. It's the 1st of April. He takes a look at the progress of the magazine. He's not happy. And he did what Swamiji was famous for this. He just threw everything up in the air and reorganized everything. So suddenly, Mandalas and I found ourselves with a magazine in our laps. We were supposed to get a magazine to the press by the end of May. It was the beginning of April. I didn't know, like Dr. Ballant, I didn't know anything about putting together a magazine. And Madalasa was the business manager, so she had to figure out how to get it printed. We couldn't print it in-house. It took a web press, so it meant going out, finding printing resources, how to sell advertising. We were kind of working on that, and they had some, you can't really sell advertising for a magazine that doesn't exist. So we were calling the people who, Swamiji students who were helping with that and just giving us ads and stuff. And then she also had to figure out how to create a subscription magazine for the mainstream population and how to get it on the newsstand. So she had to do all of that. And Swamiji decided that wasn't quite enough, so he wanted her to be the hostess with the mostest. So she got appointed as the head of guest services for his special guests. And she's putting together teas and all sorts of things. Going to Petra, who was a really good pastry cook, getting Petra to make, delicacies at the last minute and serving these guests. So you saw the picture of the first magazine cover, and we won't even talk about how that came into existence, but it was, Sujata said, photo finish, no kidding. Totally a photo finish. And one of the things I was desperate for material, and Pandiji agreed to write a story from the Puranas. It was called The Weaver and Human Destiny. He generously sat down and dictated a story from the Puranas. Ask him what the fallout from that was, because there were some very surprising results. But anyway, that's a story for another time. You have to get him to tell you. So on the art department side, on the visual side, Kamala Gerhardt, who was one of the people who was teaching Pandiji English when he first moved to Minneapolis. She'd been living in Minneapolis. She had a fledgling business as a freelance designer. Swamiji persuaded her to move here, and she was given to understand that she was going to be the art director. So now we're on a treadmill, because this magazine has to go to press every 8 weeks, and we do not know what we're doing. We also have no budget, and we have to get all this material somehow. So I went back a couple of days ago and looked at the first 3 years of the magazine. It was all black and white, and it was all done in-house. All the photographs were taken by people who lived here. One of those photographers, Lyle Olson, turned himself into a professional photographer in the course of working on Yoga International. He installed a darkroom upstairs and started developing all the film himself. But we were still typesetting. So Darlene Clark was typesetting the magazine. She was also, at that time, the head of the women's residential program. She was also doing, like Mira, long reception shifts. And then occasionally, when they were printing a book and things got a little out of control, they'd pull them. Mick would go in and pull whoever was up working in the barn, and they'd be working on the binding machines. So that's the way the Institute went forward. So like I said, everything we did in the magazine, everything was in-house. Swamiji was really generous. He wrote the lead feature for the first 9 issues. which was great because at least I had that already taken care of. But the thing is, he didn't want the Institute he didn't want Yoga International to look like a mainstream magazine, so he wrote the first couple under his name, and then he started writing them under pseudonyms. So you see Ananda Ghosh, Boli Prabhu, I can't remember which other ones he used. And as far as the other columns and things, we were getting them from the teachers that Swamiji had so patiently trained. And they were good teachers, and they knew a lot, but really they weren't writers. So we, metaphorically, we were basically rewriting everything except for Swamiji's articles. And then Pandiji, that's with the second issue, agreed to write a column called Inner Quest. And that question and answer column, I'm sure everybody in this room remembers that. He wrote it for years, I think all the way until the magazine went digital in 2013. So I don't know how many columns that was. But I realized with that, remember, I didn't know what I was doing, but I realized that it was a lot better to have a regular columnist than to try to go around to the teachers on the faculty or people in the centers and try to get them to write a column that I was then going to have to rewrite. So Sandy Anderson, who had come to the Institute shortly after I had, agreed to try her hand at writing an asana column. She was so good at it that she got co-opted and ended up writing an asana column for 10 years. She wrote 60 columns before the whole thing was done, and in the process turned herself into a really good writer and then started writing features. So Aradhana was Swamiji felt sorry for me. I think at one point I started complaining that I couldn't do it all. So he assigned Aradhana to me as a proofreader. And then she gradually morphed into a copy editor. So she became a really skilled copy editor. And then she started working with the art department, started working on production, just started getting more and more involved in the magazine. But all the time, she was the head of the residential program. That was her full-time job. The rest of the magazine stuff was just something she was doing on the side. And then the other thing that she would do is periodically, she had bookkeeping experience, so periodically we'd get way behind in accounting, and we couldn't close the books for the year and have the audit that we were legally required to do until the books got closed. And so Radhana would disappear into the accounting office for days and weeks at a time and become an accountant. I had mixed feelings about that. Really mixed feelings, because by that time I was also the president. So as the president, I wanted the books closed and I wanted the audit done. But as the editor, I was always panicked about getting the next issue out. Madalasa, meanwhile, had developed into a really good business manager. She was quite good at it. She started to get skilled at working with printers, and which was a skill that stood her in good stead, because she ended up, when we stopped doing our printing our books ourselves, she ended up as the head of the Himalayan Institute Press and was figuring out how to get books printed. And she ended up being an expert on printing in the United States and India and China before it was all over. But in the interim, and all through that period, Pandiji decided that the Institute needed a business manager, and that business manager should be Madalasa. So she became the HI business manager, not instead of being the YI business manager, but in addition to being the YI business manager. Meanwhile, Rolf, who was thought he was safely on the sidelines. He was, by that time, Virat and Kieran had moved down to the Institute, and Rolf was in Buffalo. He and Mary Gale were the co-directors, and they were extremely busy. They were building a thriving center. Rolf was seeing private patients. He was probably studying Sanskrit at the University of Buffalo at that point. He was also lecturing and running programs at the Buffalo Center. So he more than had his hands full. But I got into one of my perennial jams and needed a pranayama column. I tried. We started to get things from outside and from other traditions and that kind of stuff, but I never could really get quality material on pranayama. So I asked Rolf if he would write the pranayama column, and he kind of reluctantly agreed. So he wrote a pranayama column. Yeah, you know that saying about no good deed goes unpunished? He was so good at it that he ended up writing a pranayama column every 2 months for years. I could go on. It was a heady time. But one of the things that was interesting, and Kamala Gerhardt, who was doing all the artwork, reminded me when I talked to her about this the other day, that there was an interesting balance between grace and self-effort. I've been talking about all the self-effort, you know, the way that the residents just soldiered up and got the work done against all odds. But there were also moments of just amazing grace. One of them came when somebody showed up in the STP program who was, I can't remember exactly. He was publishing a small magazine himself, Desktop. So he got assigned to the art department, and Kamala started pulling the knowledge out of his head about how to produce a magazine on Desktop. We bought computer equipment, and she gradually taught herself. We did one element at a time, starting with typesetting it and then working our way into doing the photos online. And then the second descent of grace happened in the form of a woman named Jeanette Robertson, who came to the STP program. She lived over here on the Susquehanna River, and she just wanted a month of R&R and to really study yoga a little bit. She got assigned to the art department. She was a professional artist and a really skilled designer. So after working with Kamala for a month, it became really clear how much we could expand the visuals in the magazine by hiring her, by continuing to have her effort, and Madalasa agreed to let us hire her. So she was the first chink in the self-sufficiency, you could say, in a way. We started, and she stayed with the magazine for years. And shortly after that, Jackie Bogdan, who's sitting here in this audience somewhere, showed up at the Institute. And I can't remember the details, Jackie, but I know that you ended up working with Kamala. Kamala taught you a lot of things about desktop publishing. You were just getting fairly confident at it when she had an accident and had to take some time off, and we had Jackie to take her place. Jackie, by the way, is now the head of the Himalayan Institute in Buffalo. So there were all sorts of things like that. There was also a boomerang effect, though, from that grace business. So an example would be Nancy Lilienthal. She showed up in about 1996, 1997, and got assigned to the magazine. And then people never got assigned to the magazine, partly because there were so many things that the Institute really needed that as the president, I couldn't really take resources for myself that I could see were needed somewhere else. But Nancy, somehow, we got Nancy. And Nancy really had great literary skills. She was good. So she took over the book reviews, and she was able to help me create this column called Kaleidoscope that was at the beginning of the magazine. It was a nice visual spread that let us use Kamala and Jackie and Jeanette's design skills and give the magazine a more magazine-y feel, but it was really, really labor intensive. Nancy was instrumental in creating that and instrumental in putting it together for a couple of months, and then somebody, could have been me in my schizophrenic role, realized that Nancy was a gracious person and a great hostess, and she left Yoga International and became the guest services manager and the head of guest services, and she stayed doing that job for 15 years. Meanwhile, we're left trying to scramble and figure out we have this very popular column and we've got to keep it going. And that's just kind of the way things worked. I could go on. I think I've gone on quite long enough. But you know, the interesting thing about looking back at all that was how much fun it was. It was challenging, but it was enormously empowering. We got to discover all sorts of capacities that we didn't know we had. We got to try things that we would never get to try to do. And that wasn't true just in the magazine. That was true in the whole institute. Clarence, for instance, had been our auto mechanic. He morphed into our facilities manager and spent 10 or 15 years methodically re-engineering all the systems in the building. And that was something that he was in no way qualified to do. Not on paper anyway. You know, so that was what the institute was like in those days. You know, Rolf and Dr. Valentine really talked about the teachings that Swamiji brought forward. And living here at the Institute really allowed us to embody those feelings and to learn those lessons ourselves. Pandiji starts out his commentary on the Yoga Sutra, the Secret of the Yoga Sutra, by saying that a human being is an island of excellence. Nothing is beyond our reach. And our experiences living here really taught us the truth of that. We developed trust in ourselves, trust in each other, and absolute confidence that the difficult would take a while to do. No, the difficult we could do right away, but the impossible would take a little longer. And that's, if you look around now, today, you see that spirit is still very much alive here at the Institute. You see it in Pure Rejuve, you see it in the exponential growth of Yoga International. You see it in the way that Brian and his team have turned this into a vibrant retreat center, and also in the come into existence of Soma by Jeff that Jeff and Ishan are accomplishing. So if you go in the hall upstairs, you'll see that there's still a section of blank wall that the timeline hasn't yet filled. And I'm going to be really interested to see what that looks like 20 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Before we take a break, we wanted to share a video message from Rod Stryker. Many of you are familiar. Rod Stryker is the founder of Para Yoga, a close member of the Institute, and an honorary board member of the HI Board of Directors since 2002. Rod wasn't able to be with us this weekend, but he wanted to share a message with us.
Hi, I'm Rod Stryker. Hi, I'm Rod Stryker, and I'm honored and privileged to be part of this celebration, the 45th anniversary of the Himalayan Institute. The Institute is, in fact, my spiritual home. I first came to it and met the head of it, Pandiji, in 1999. Looking back at these 17 years or so, I can tell you that there is and has been no more valuable resource in terms of its effect on the whole of my life. I taught yoga for something like 20 years and had an intensive relationship with my teacher prior to meeting Pandiji and to finding my home at the Institute. And within 2-3 days, and more specifically having had time to begin to feel the presence and the vitality and the power of the transmission of these teachings, of which really have been the Himalayan Institute has been the base for, where I really felt as though I had spent 20 years preparing for this new beginning in my relationship, both with myself and with the world. For those of you that have grown with the Institute, any part of these 45 years, in fact, know that you found a unique treasure. And that has certainly been the case for me. The unique treasure, I think, the fact that the Himalayan Institute is what it is and does what it does, is informed by the fact that it is, on the one hand, a profound sanctuary for ancient wisdom, wisdom that has really lighted humanity for thousands of years. And there are few more authentic and more in-depth offerings as it relates to the Veda, as it relates to Tantra, and to Yoga, and to Ayurveda, and the whole of the great offerings that these wisdom traditions provide. The Himalayan Institute is what it is in part because of the work of a lineage of seekers and masters. Of course, it was started by Pandiji's master, Swami Rama, who I never had the pleasure of meeting, but it's not long after you've had some time at the Institute that you begin to feel this great and profound master's work still alive. The Institute's mission to continue to carry on the great wisdom tradition, along with the fact of its vibrancy as a living institute, where above all else, practice and leading an exemplary life really comes to life. As an offering to all seekers, the Institute is truly unique in this sense, an amalgam of both traditional wisdom and vibrant living practice, where really I think one of the most touching things and profound things about the Institute is its sense of acknowledging and honoring the inner teacher of all individuals as being the ultimate teacher. There are few institutions that really make the individual's thriving the highest priority. And that kind of priority and that kind of meaning is what those of us who have had the great opportunity to find the Institute and experience its offerings have come to enjoy. Truly, there's no part of my life that is not, in fact, infected by the wonderful and sublime teachings, practices, and really the living the legacy of the practitioners who came before me. I am thankful to Pandiji in ways that really I find hard to explain. I'm thankful to Rolf Sovik and to Sandy Anderson and to Dr. Carey and really to the array of people who I met who have had more time and whose roots are even deeper than mine in the Himalayan Institute. I am thankful to each of them, not just for their willingness to carry on this profound and meaningful legacy, but also in the fact that each of them represents such a life well lived, a conscious, deliberate attempt to be the very best that they can be. There's a simple fact that I've noticed over the years as a seeker, and that is that the deeper you move into these teachings, two things begin to unfold. One is there's we'll say it, a visceral sense of peace and presence that surrounds people who are deeply committed to the practices and the wisdom that Pandiji and his masters and his masters' masters have passed on to us. And the second is this sense of inclusiveness, where our, let's say, the circle of our compassion grows ever larger. And that certainly is an example and exemplified in both the Institute and its mission, as well as those committed practitioners and followers of the Institute. The work that the Institute has done as it relates to its humanitarian efforts really speaks to the profound sense of spiritual accomplishment that is present in the Institute and the individuals at the Institute. Its humanitarian efforts, as well as its deep concern and love for traditional wisdom. I could go on, but in short, I'm just honored and pleased to be part of it, to be part of your day, to be part of this day. Even from a distance, my family and I send our blessings and our deep appreciation. And speaking for myself, I can say that every blessing in my life, everything of meaning and worth that I have found in these nearly 20 years has been lit and made possible by the gifts I've received from the Himalayan Institute and the masters who gave their love and their wisdom to the students who've sustained it. So in deep appreciation, and to all of you, may you carry on and be inspired to maintain and support this mission of the Institute. May we all grow together and support the Institute as it continues to serve us and we continue to serve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rod. That was really beautiful. We're going a little bit late, so we'll take just a short 5-minute break. Since it is live streamed, we'll begin promptly 5 minutes from now, and we'll have a few more reflections before Pandiji shares his final thoughts. Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from a close, dear friend and member, David Frechter. David is a successful entrepreneur, patron member of the Institute, and chairperson of the Institute's Humanitarian Fundraising Committee. Welcome, David.
So first I want to say I'm very honored and grateful to have been asked by Pandiji to speak at the Institute's 45th anniversary celebration. So with just a few minutes, I wanted to ensure I could share some important sentiments. So rather than share freely, I've prepared what's in my heart. So in comparison to many of you, my involvement with the Institute may be relatively new. However, I'm far from being a newbie in this lineage. I was first initiated into this tradition when I was 17 and still in high school. My guru and teacher at that time was Prem Rawat, known back then as Maharaji. Pandiji recently enlightened me that Prem Rawat and his brother Satpal often sought out the counsel and blessings of Swamiji and had further ties to our lineage through their parents. I arrived at the Institute in the fall of 2011, less than 5 years ago, to attend a training with Yoga Rupa Rod Stryker. At the time, I was well aware of HI's humanitarian projects and sought out its director. Jeff Abella was not on site. However, in his absence, John Daskowski, who was serving as Jeff's assistant, was very kind to share with me about HI's humanitarian projects. Leading to this period, I mysteriously sensed my future was somehow connected to Africa. The forum, however, was to be revealed. My interest in Africa became known to Pandiji, so each time I returned to HI, he always made a point to bring me up to date about Cameroon and possible expansion in other parts of West Africa. This led to my participation last year in the Eco Service Journey. It was there in Cameroon that my understanding deepened around the extent and scope of HI's efforts on the ground. As the trip drew near completion, I sat with Jeff to digest my experience and suggested the concept of a fundraising committee to help support the development and growth of the Cameroon programs. Jeff's eyes lit up and welcomed my suggestion, after which he asked if I would spearhead this endeavor. Without hesitation or preconception, I gladly accepted. The HI Cameroon Fundraising Committee now has a volunteer team of 4 professionals, including Suzanne Thomas, Robin King, and Dorothy Spence. We gathered initially last December and set in motion plans to throw our collective energy behind the existing fundraising campaign to raise $150,000 for satellite libraries and health centers. When the campaign came to an end on April 15th of this year, we surpassed that goal and raised $170,000. The team is now laying groundwork to support HI's humanitarian 2016 fundraising, as well as planting seeds for a public campaign to reach a wider audience of new supporters. On another front, in the fall of 2014, as plans were being made to separate Yoga International from the mothership HI, Pandiji asked me to become involved in the stewardship of the soon-to-be independent and for-profit YI. I now serve on its board and provide ongoing consultation for this exciting enterprise. My association with YI over these past 18 months has been extremely gratifying. The dynamic and committed team at YI, under the superb management and guidance of Todd Wolfenberg, are a pleasure to work beside. The collective team has continued to achieve and surpass monthly strategic and financial goals, approaching almost 1 million Facebook followers and 12,000 monthly subscribers. YI sits in a league of its own as a digital online platform providing continued education and support of yogic studies to a global audience. We are all guardians of a wisdom trust and a body of knowledge that we hope to pass on for generations to come. Yet to achieve this in a rapidly changing landscape of culture, technology, and communication, we need to adjust and apply skills and tools so the next generation can recognize the gifts of our lineage in the language and nuances spoken today. In summary, we are here at the threshold of a new era for HI, one that I like to say holds the ancient future. I see HI as a thriving, multi-generational community, living a vast experiment of a 21st century tantric way of life, with a diversity of independent enterprises or cottage industries, providing support for the greater whole and helping to ignite the flame of inner truth and knowledge for all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Finally, we'll hear from Virat Xavier. Virat has been an HI member since 1973 and served in a truly extraordinary list of roles spanning from director of our HI New York East-West, HI Buffalo, HI Glenview, HI Main Street, and our international centers. And it's truly an extraordinary tenure of service. So Virat, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Sean. I feel kind of tired after that introduction, you know. It's hard to believe, actually. And so when I was asked to do this talk, this is a short talk, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? How can I explain all the things that I've experienced and what people are going to experience, the new people, the new faces are going to experience from the Institute. It's more exciting now, okay? Before, it was we had to do it, everybody did it because it had to be done. Here, there's so many aspects of what we can do. Everybody's got a part of this Institute. David, right here, explained thoroughly what can be done and what his part is. He's a new face. I met him, I think, in India, around the Kajut too, also. So I think back, I think about when I met Swamiji, how he impressed me. And let me just tell you a little bit how I came to meet Swamiji. I had gone to the Himalayan Institute. It was called the Yoga Society of Milwaukee at that time. Before that, I was doing some volunteering service it was called Underground Switchboard, which was crisis intervention. So I was on the phone talking to people who had problems with drugs and emotional problems and everything. I was just in college. I'm not sure if I knew what I was doing, actually. You know, I was probably one of them. I could have been on the other line. So, anyways, after that, I went away, and Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now, came out. I met somebody and talking about it. I said, oh, this is really interesting. Here's a guru, and his Americans went over there and met this guru and went to India. I said, so it'd be nice to meet somebody like that. And then all of a sudden, somebody from the switchboard called me and said, hey, I need somebody to get some resources for alternative methods of Tai Chi, yoga, Gestalt, everything that was out there. This is back in the early 70s. So I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So I asked one of my coworkers, I said, do you know anybody who maybe teaches anything that'd be interesting? He says, oh yeah, I have a person who teaches yoga, at this yoga society. I said, oh great, okay, let me meet her. So she gave me a telephone number, I called her. I was living outside in a farm. She says, oh yeah, I'll be there in 45 minutes. Got there, knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, nobody answered. So I said, okay. Then 2 days later, I said, okay, I'll go in. So I said, I'm in town, it'll be 20 minutes, I'll be there. Did the same thing. Nothing happened. Third time, I says, I'm at the corner on the phone. Are you there? She says, yeah, I'm here. Knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, no answer. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to go to the center. I want to see what happens there. I'll just meet people there. So I met the person there, and this was like a person with this frizzy hair. It was like, like a hippie. Looked like a hippie, but when you talk to him and when you talk with this person, it was like, wow, this person's really grounded. There's something different. Even though he looks like, he's kind of wild and everything, he's really down to earth. Wesley, that's the person that I met first time. And then when I went there, I had some things my father gave me when he moved. I said, I've got all this stuff, you can have it. You can have these things, you can take them. I don't need them. So maybe about 2 months later, all of a sudden, somebody comes from the Institute to lecture at the Milwaukee hall there. And then all of a sudden, I get introduced to this person, And I said, where were you? I said, I knocked on your door. I said, is there something wrong with your bell? She said, no. I said, no. I said, I knew you were there, but I didn't hear the doorbell. I didn't hear a knock. I didn't hear anything. And I was thinking, well, I guess it was meant to be that I had to go there just physically and just be there and just to see what was going on there, the classes and everything. So when I found out, so Leslie and Nina and these people talked to me about their teacher. He said, oh yes, he's a master from India. I thought to myself, a master from India? Wow! What a great deal. I don't have to go to India. I have a master right here. So he said, okay, we're going to go to see him. He's coming back from India. So that was like 1973. And so we went there, and at the Flamingo Hotel, and we went there in the hall there. And while I was driving, I was asking the driver, I said, what about these questions? I asked him a ton of questions. The guy got so mad, he says, why don't you just ask Swamiji? Why are you asking me? I said, okay, I'll do that. So I sat in the audience, and I was listening. And as he was talking, all the answers to my questions were answered. They were all there. I said, wow, there's something here, must be something here. But the most important thing that I noticed about him was his feet. I don't know why. He was bare feet. He's walking around in the hallway. After the lecture, all of a sudden my eye goes to his feet. And all of a sudden my mind goes, Buddha feet. The Buddha feet? He's not from Buddha, I said, Buddha feet. And I said, okay. And then after that, he came to me and shook the hand. He says, how are you, Sonny? And then after that, he came to Buffalo, and after about 2 or 3 months, I got initiated. And during that initiation, he said, so what do you want to do? I never thought about it. What do you want to do? And all of a sudden, I said, teach. He says, okay, Sonny, I'll help you. I didn't know what I was going to be teaching. So after a few months, maybe about another year or so, I started teaching Hatha Yoga. That was an experience for me because I never was able to get in front of an audience and talk. It was very difficult. And here I am teaching a Hatha class. Lucky I had to just, do some poses. And I said, okay, do this, So most of it was just showing by example, show and tell kind of thing. So it was easier. But after a while, then I got the confidence more. I started talking and to people and getting inspired myself. So I realized that teaching was a method of learning from the students. It seems odd, but that's what it is. It gives a chance for the teacher to learn from the students. We say something, and the person listens, but maybe they don't do something right. And then we realize that, oh, maybe I need to speak in a particular way. Maybe I need to change the way I do things. Maybe I need to do something different. So in this way, every time that I teach, and I had that example given to me actually through Swamiji to be able to teach people. And so that's where the whole process started. As far as all those centers and so on, I feel sometimes it's like there's nobody else. So I guess it had to be me, so I just did it. And people asked me and said, well, how did you how'd you get in this position? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think I just was there, and someone just said, okay, you do this. I said, okay. It's got to be done. Okay, I'll do it. So every time, it's kind of like, sometimes they call me like, they call me SWAT team or something to make sure. I'm the first one in, okay? In center, if there's no center there, I'm the first one to go there and start something. And sometimes I'm the last one to leave. So these things, it just happens, and I said, okay, fine, great. I enjoy the beginning parts. I enjoy these things. So why not? Why not, And it continues to this day, meaning that now we're in India. Me and my wife are coordinators of the Kajoho and Allahabad Center. So we're there, and waiting for you all to come there. We're there to be your guest, your host, and you're our guest. And we don't like empty rooms, So please, it's a great place. It's a place that is a sadhana, a place of sadhana. Especially Kajaho is a very special place. Space of Sri Vidya, Divine Mother, and Allahabad with the Ganga in front. Already Divine Mother is there. So all those two places and the atmosphere of India makes it very special. When I get off the plane, I enter the airport. All of a sudden I think, hey, this is Mother. This is my mother. I want to touch the ground. So please come and visit us. And I'm really, really glad to see all the new people, all the new students. I want to make sure that I don't leave my life without seeing the new faces taking my positions and doing my things and saying, come, I'm ready to give you my duties. You can take them, and I'm gone. I'm retired. Started when I was 24, I'm 67 now. So legally, I am retired. But it doesn't mean anything for the Institute. I can say, I'm retired, and you say, okay, throw that garbage away over there. Move that weed, pick that weed, come on. So, but that's the family, this spiritual family, the tradition of the Himalayan masters. And that's the main thing. And that's what I feel in my heart. This energy, this is what is important. Even though my body has got gray hair and thinning and a little bit too much weight at this time, I feel the energy within from the people being here and people doing things. Whatever job you have, it's important. Whatever position in this institute is important. The main thing is you do what you can. You know who you are. And if you know who you are, That's the most important thing. That's the spiritual thing. And do that, and just do it open-heartedly and with grace. And Swamiji said, he says to love all, exclude none. Well, all my life I've been trying to work on that one. It's easy, not easy. I try to, do as much as I can, and hopefully newcomers and so on will do the same, so that you feel what I feel. I feel joyous when I at the Institute, and I see all the progress, all the remodeling and everything. Every time I come here, it's like, oh God, where'd this come from? How did this change? I have to have a tour of the building and facilities. I'm gone for 7 months, and all of a sudden come back and say, oh, do you know about this new place here? New rooms have been set up, and lab now. It's it's coffee and chocolate. I said, hey, I want to go there. So, thank you all for being here with me, and I'm sure that there's a lot more here to come. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Virat. What a lovely way to conclude the reflections on 45 years of service with a message to all of us who are trying to take the work forward. And now for a presentation from Pandiji on the Himalayan Institute mission, Our Roots, Our Future. I forgot to even give an introduction, perhaps because I maybe assumed that everyone knew. But for those
It's
of
all
us,
right.
is it
When
all
the
right?
son introduces father, it's great joy. It's wonderful. Before I greet you all, those who are here, and all of those who are digitally attending this celebration, please allow me to share something which is very personal, and pray that I don't get emotional. Okay. I'm a professional lecturer, I don't get emotional, but these are some occasions which I think it is all right. It is in this auditorium I have heard Swamiji speaking, really literally, hundreds of times. And many times I took his place. Each time when he spoke, he always said, first thing, I pray to the divinity in you. One day somebody asked, what does it mean, Swamiji? He said, all of you are the sparks of the same divine. There is only one single divine being. All of you are that divine. I pray to the divinity in you that you are. Somebody got up in the audience and argued with him, asked him, that isn't that the divinity, the God is inside, not outside, so why do you pray to the divinity outside yourself? He said, I'm very proud of your understanding. All of you are slice of my own heart and extensions of my own soul. When I say that I pray to the divinity in you, I'm praying to the divinity that is everywhere, inside us, outside us, here, there, and everywhere. It is with that spirit, at this 45th anniversary, I welcome you all. Everybody shared their reflections. And all those reflections led us to one point. That is how Swami Rama, the founder of this institute, came to the West. He was sent by his master with a message. He was a great soul. He embodied great wisdom, yogic siddhis. But I was not sent here, but rather I was brought here. I was planted by Swamiji in his own garden. And as I told you, all of you are slices of his own heart, extension of his own soul. All of you are manifestations of the same divinity that shines through the sun, moons, and stars. Therefore, I have been planted in the garden that is you are. I have been planted in the garden of the Himalayan Institute, which is comprised of you, which is sustained by you. I'm just one of the trees that has been planted in the orchard of the sages, the great masters. And it is pure sign of an ignorance that a tree worries about its existence. The soil, the garden, is provided with everything that is needed for a tree to sustain itself and one day blossoms. Today, it is time that all of us who make the Himalayan Institute realize this fact, that all of us are the custodians of, the leaders of this great wisdom, this great knowledge. And it is in this context I'll share with you what are our roots and what is our future. The knowledge of our roots will infuse our minds and heart with a deep gratitude that what we have inherited, it will also infuse our minds and hearts with enthusiasm and courage that we can accomplish anything. All we have to know, all we have to do, recognize what we stand for, why do we exist, and how important it is that we bring forward the best of ourselves, best of the Institute, best of the aroma that we little blossoms combine and turn into Himalayan Institute and share that aroma with the rest of the world and let everybody benefit from it. Himalayan Institute has its roots in a long line of sages. Their collective experience tells us that there is only one reality, and everything that we see at physical level is a manifestation of that reality. It is in this light Swamiji brought all of the teachings and practices that he shared here. This is what all we need to know, and this is what all we need to do. Today, we have forgotten very many facets of the spiritual wisdom that yoga as a tradition represents. On one hand, there is a great deal of growth in the world of yoga, but it is definitely has shrunk from where it was in 1960s and 70s. Many of you are here from that era, and many of you watching this live streaming will remember that how broad were the teachings of yoga 30, 40 years ago. Despite the fact that the physical dimension of yoga has made a remarkable progress and yet its applicability has become narrower. Especially when we can clearly see that we are headed, may God forbid, what I see in future. But it does not take great wisdom, too much wisdom to see that what the future of the humanity could be if we do not make a sincere and conscious effort to prevent it. We are a mighty nation. Many of the Americans do not realize the power of their dollars. Every day, dollar is getting stronger. That's very wonderful. Time to time, there are a few hiccups here and there, sneezes and hiccups, so-called in the world of economy. And we bounced back. Those are absolutely negligent things, completely irrelevant. When we look at humanity as a whole, what is concerning today is that how profound has become our inner unrest. How drastically our capacity to tolerate others' presence is declining. What has happened to the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, Jesus Christ, Buddha, and very many other great teachers, where we have been constantly told that love all and exclude none. All these masters from East and West have been reminding us that fear and doubt are the greatest enemy of mankind. And these two enemies are getting stronger every day. Still we are asking scientific community to tell us that the fear, worry, doubt, anger, hatred, and constant fear and insecurity, is there any relationship between these mental conditions and our health? We are asking scientific community to tell us as though if somewhere nature or the divine providence has taken our common sense away. Still we organize seminars and symposiums and conferences to discuss and debate whether or not peace and tranquility, happiness is important thing in life. Peace to be debated, and only after we come to a so-called, to some logical conclusion that peace is a necessity, not a matter of debate, only then will work actively to create a peaceful family society. Somebody else has to give a proof that a family and society is comprised of individuals. Peace and happiness in family and society, therefore, is dependent on having peaceful individuals. And the peace and happiness of individuals depends on what kind of quality of heart and mind they have. This has to be debated, only then we will accept it and acknowledge it. That is pathetic. This is a time I can clearly see that world is in dire need of bringing back those time-tested experiences that a healthy body and a clear mind and joyful soul is something that adds value to our life, and without that, life is a living death. And it is in this context I say, here is our future. Future is, as our mission itself states, that our mission is, our goal and objective is to educate, inspire, and provide environment to individuals so that they can discover their hidden potentials and do something about that with that potential. Let it blossom. Let human beings become fully grown human being and filled with confidence that they have everything they need to find fulfillment and ultimate freedom here in this lifetime. Process can begin by opening Himalayan Institute to a larger and larger group of seekers. We have to make an active effort to dismantle this idea, dismantle this ignorance propelled belief that I am this tradition, I belong to this tradition, or I belong to that tradition. This is my brand yogi spirituality, that is your brand name is spirituality. Thomas Friedman wrote about this flat world several years ago. Now it's not just flat. It is very small world in that respect. On digital highways, we are rushing very fast. You can clearly see. It took ages and ages for very many great companies here in the United States and everywhere else to cross their total asset beyond 50 billion. How long did it take Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook to reach, which took ages to IBM, which was already a company of cutting-edge technology in its time. But what about, it took 300 years, 400 years for the East India Company to plunder, destroy, loot, conquer and kill, then become a big company without going through that painful process. It took only a few years for Apple and Google to far exceed what East India Company used to be. We are living in that world with this kind of fast-moving technology and a culture that is run by that technology. There comes some price also. Are we prepared to face that? It took almost 3 years for the United States to transport its around 250,000 soldiers and all the machineries and weaponries that it needed to reach Iraq. And then it took, the United States gave 3 days to say, if you don't shape up yourself in such and such time, in 3 days' time, 72 hours time, then I will strike. You know, how long does it take to someone now enter your living room? So how long does it take for someone to shake up entire New York City And how long does it take from the President of the United States to run away from the Oval Office and hide somewhere in a little unknown place? Seconds. Therefore, what could be the size of the fear and insecurity today that we are living in? That is just one aspect of it. What about the impact it has on us? Scientists are still working very hard to see whether or not there is a relationship between fear and loss of memory. Wow! Definitely, an organization like us cannot afford to throw away thousands of years of collective wisdom that tells us what is actually the force that nurtures our brain, keeps us healthy, happy, peaceful, and truly prosperous, both inside and outside us. We cannot afford to do that. Therefore, the future of the Institute is that we go back to our roots. That means recognize once again in a much brighter way that we are custodian of wisdom that is laden with love and compassion. And this wisdom and love and compassion is open to all. And that is even passive way of looking at it and thinking of it. But rather, the kind of privilege we have, same privilege demands that we must take responsibility of carrying this flame of love, wisdom, and compassion from heart to heart and door to door and community to community and nation to nation. Of course, it must begin at a very practical level, and that is that we transform further this Himalayan Institute's campus and make the best use of technology to let the people know that this campus exists. And we must figure out a way of using the technology to take our campus to their living rooms, even to their bathrooms. Now people take their cell phone, iPhone in their bathrooms. We have to reach people's bathrooms, bedrooms, living rooms, with good message, with good knowledge, with good wisdom, with love and compassion. And just as digital industry is very ruthless. It does not give you chance. On one hand, it tells you underneath when you get a message, it tells you, you are you have subscribed. If you want to unsubscribe, do that. And as soon as you try to unsubscribe, you have to go through all 7 layers of hells of Dante. Then you get tired of that, and therefore you just accept it. So I'm inviting people from all walks of life, especially the young ones, those who know that how to use this device to penetrate every human minds and hearts and all the way to our cells and influence our mitochondrial existence. That is the world we are living in. This is not called diluting the wisdom, but rather it is called using the right mode of transport system to transport the wisdom and make sure that it reaches the right place in right manner. In this regard, I wish to announce a few things. Number one, very soon, Himalayan Institute's website is going to be launched. It is going to be very beautiful, very fulfilling, very thrilling. In this website, we'll keep releasing without overwhelming you all. We'll keep putting on our web 45 years of our wisdom and knowledge and experience that we have. Thousands of hours of Swamiji's spoken materials. Rolf, myself, Dr. Valentine, many, Sandy Anderson, and everyone's materials are there. There will be a vast amount of translation, in direct translation or in paraphrased manner, from thousands of years of materials. Therefore, please, wherever you are, make sure you keep in touch with the Himalayan Institute web. At some point, we wish to be IT savvy. Right now, we are not at there. Therefore, as your friend, as your teacher, as a highest ranking servant of this organization, I request that don't wait for us to reach you. Try your best to reach us. Yes, once our resources are there, talent is there, manpower is there, we'll knock at your door 10 times a day, just as this digital industry does. So that is one thing. Second thing, after watching what happened, what kind of miracle has happened in Khajuraho, we are feeling, on one hand, very happy, but at the same time, little bit, Hansdale is our headquarters. There has to be better and bigger and more beautiful and more spiritually vibrant Khajuraho right here in Hansdale. So may God bless Alan Spector, our architect, who took care of Khajuraho. May God bless Bonnie Albert, who has been perennially following a tradition. Tradition means whenever there is a new project, new idea, new venture at the Himalayan Institute, she is the first one to contribute and provide the seed money or resources. Many such people are there. So soon we are about to launch a project that will set Himalayan Institute for centuries to come, with the help of all those quote old-timers, those who embody very matured knowledge, love, and wisdom, those whose blessings are always highly valued. I request them to continue bestowing their love and generosity just as they have been doing for ages. I request a new generation to come forward, to take this work forward in a manner which is most appropriate in the context of our ever-changing society. In this regard, before I close, which I thought I will not do it, but just because somehow this thought flashed in my mind, the memories flashed in my mind, that all of you are slices of those great masters and sages, extension of their own heart, their own soul, their own love, their own wisdom. Therefore, it is in that context I must express my profound gratitude, and I must share my profound love and blessings with some individuals who represent the entire Himalayan Institute. Very blessed Rajni Bhai Shah, entire Shah family, Mark and Astrid, my blessed friend and supporter of the Institute, Robert Donnelly, Nancy Lilienthal, Mira Delhan, list can go on. lots of people, if I start mentioning their names, it will take 10 times longer time than the Deborah will be took the podium. So I don't want to go that far. But there are many such people. Some of you are here, and I know how humble you are, and therefore I do not want to embarrass you by mentioning their name and by talking about your love and generosity and contributions. Many of you are sitting and watching worldwide. You know, people in India, Germany, Japan, people all over the world. My love and blessings to all of you. And please, stay in touch with the Institute and see what is about to happen. As Ishan told you, that 45th anniversary is a little bit odd. If I use my Pandit head, I can tell you lots of things based on numerology, for example. 45 means 4 and 5. 4 plus 5 means 9. 9 is the highest number, most auspicious. It comes from a Navarna mantra. I can just say all those things. But the truth is that this perfectly coincides with Swamiji's Mahasamadhi, 20th Mahasamadhi. That is something very, very dear to us. In fact, none of us had any plan to talk about too much about Swamiji. But that's the nature of love. You try your best to stop talking about someone whom you truly love, you will fail. You know? So that's what happened to us here. And therefore, let us take this message that it is on his 20th Mahasamadhi. 20 years ago he left his body. On this 45th anniversary of the founding of the Himalayan Institute, we are making a resolution that next 5 years that we are going to work very, very, very hard, because that is something the distinguishing feature of our tradition. No matter how hard you work, still it's not enough. With that spirit, we are going to work harder than ever, at least for these next 5 years. And we want to set an example that harder you work, younger you remain. Okay? That is secret of perpetual youth. Okay? And these 5 years' time, we resolve to set this example and present the proof to the world that there is no substitute for hard work. And as soon as you commit yourself to hard work, the Yoga Sutra, chapter 2, Sutra 43, 44, and 45, they just come forward, and that means Patanjali and Vyasa and the rest of the sages also join the hands. And your youthful vitality returns. Decrepitude and weaknesses stemming from that are kept at bay. And in next 5 years' time, people will not demand for proof. In that much time, we'll hold very many other year-long Akhand Japa, meditation, and will invite and will bring Mount Kailas from Tibet, Divine Mother from Himalayas and Khajuraho, and will have a place which by its own virtue will exude the energy of transformation and thus it will continue serving humanity for a long time, and it will inspire us, it will educate us, it will provide us all the tools and means that we need to materialize life's goal. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and I continue looking forward to see you again and share what the sages have given to us. God bless you all.
The program now? The program now is to conclude. Everyone is very late for their chai, which was promised to you all. But before we leave, I just wanted to thank everyone joining us online and to everyone here. Please do stay tuned. We have a lot of really wonderful things that we're planning to roll out by the fall. Certainly by our annual meeting later this summer or fall, we'll have a lot of great updates about our new mission membership program, about the new hi.org, and a number of other great projects that are coming up. So thank you all for joining us. And upstairs we have refreshments in the dining hall. For those of you joining online, please come so you can have your chai in person and check out all the great things happening here. And for those of you who are here, I think we're also, if you'd like to share some of your own personal reflections, we have a little video booth set up in the PR room right next to the tea lounge and the cafe. So you're invited to share your reflections that we can post up and share online. Thanks, everyone.